Life often unfolds like a long and winding journey, littered with unpredictable challenges and moments that test our emotional strength. Each step brings new trials, and with them, emotions surge. Sometimes unexpectedly, often overwhelmingly. You've likely felt it before. Stress building, frustration rising, the heat of anger pulsing in your chest. In those moments, have you ever paused and wondered what life might feel like if you could stay calm? If you could master your emotions before they mastered you? Imagine a version of yourself who meets pressure with poise, who no longer allows fleeting impulses to override clarity. In this world, every problem becomes something you face deliberately, not reactively. In this world, emotional storms no longer shake your foundation. Instead, you respond with grounded wisdom, and in doing so, uncover an inner strength more powerful than you ever imagined. This ability, to remain calm amidst chaos, is not distant or unreachable. It lies quietly within you, waiting to be awakened. And it often stirs at the very moment tension threatens to take over. It's in that split second, when your emotions rise up and beg for release, that you're given a sacred choice: to react immediately, or to pause, breathe, and reflect, asking yourself, what can I do to avoid reacting on impulse? Is the beginning of a transformation. Staying calm isn't easy, especially when you feel disrespected, hurt, or provoked. But what separates those who simply survive hardship from those who grow through it is the ability to hold back the automatic response and choose something better. When you learn to pause, even in the most trying moments, you're not suppressing your emotions, you're mastering them. And in that mastery, you begin to reclaim your power. To not react impulsively does not mean to ignore your emotions or pretend they don't exist. On the contrary, ignoring emotions only feeds them, strengthening their hold. True calmness isn't about numbing yourself or pretending to be unaffected. It's about acknowledging what you feel, understanding the root of those feelings, and then choosing to act in a way that aligns with your deeper values, not the fleeting emotion of the moment. This is a rare and precious skill, and unfortunately, many people never realize how valuable it is. In a world where emotions are constantly triggered by the news, social media, workplace stress, and interpersonal conflicts, those who master their inner world are the ones who thrive, not just survive. Emotional mastery doesn't make you cold or disconnected. Instead, it makes you stronger in the truest sense of the word. Not strong because you always win or dominate, but strong because you are no longer fragile in the face of adversity. You are steady, anchored. You are no longer thrown off course by someone else's outburst or by a bad day. You become the calm in the storm, the person who can observe with clarity and act with intention, and that strength, quiet, consistent, and conscious, will carry you through life's most difficult seasons with grace. Think about a moment in your life when everything felt out of control. A painful disappointment, a heated argument, a tough challenge at work. Your first reaction may have been frustration or anger. Maybe you lashed out, withdrew, or gave up too soon. But what if you had done something different? What if you had paused? In that pause, there is power. That pause is the space between emotion and action, and within that space, transformation happens. In that space, you can choose a response that reflects not just your current emotion, but your highest self. That space allows you to think clearly, act wisely, and move forward without regret. Responding instead of reacting is the foundation of emotional intelligence. It doesn't mean pretending to be okay when you're not. It means owning your emotions and navigating them thoughtfully. And once you start doing that, you'll notice everything begins to shift. Your relationships improve because you're no longer saying things you don't mean. Your decisions become clearer because you're not clouded by momentary frustration. Your goals feel more achievable because you're not being derailed by unnecessary conflict. You start living with more peace, more purpose, and more confidence. And yet, this skill doesn't develop overnight. It begins with small, intentional acts, like staying composed in a stressful conversation or choosing silence over a reactive remark. It's a daily practice, one that requires patience and self-compassion, but the rewards are immeasurable. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, you won't need to remind yourself to stay calm. You'll simply become the kind of person who does. That's when you begin to notice the ripple effects. Not only does your inner world change, but your outer world begins to shift as well. We all know emotions are part of being human. Joy, anger, sadness, anxiety, they're all natural, and they all serve a purpose. But sometimes they arrive like unexpected storms, loud, overwhelming, and disorienting. You may have felt that surge of emotion after a disappointing outcome, a broken plan, or a hurtful exchange. These emotional waves hit hard and fast, and if you're not prepared, they can carry you away. But just as storms pass, so do emotions, if you allow them to. The first step in weathering them is awareness. Imagine you are the driver of a car, and your emotions are the steering wheel. The road may be bumpy, the conditions uncertain, but you always have the power to guide the direction of the vehicle. Awareness is everything. The moment you realize you are not your emotion, but the one experiencing it, you shift into a higher state of being. Emotions are messengers, not masters. They're meant to inform you, not to control you. But when they're unchecked, when you believe every thought and follow every impulse, they lead to chaos. How many times have you made a decision out of anger or fear, only to regret it later? How often have you hurt someone you care about, simply because you didn't pause to reflect? These moments are not signs of weakness. They are signs that you haven't yet learned how to manage your emotional energy. But you can. One of the most powerful tools in emotional control is curiosity. The next time you feel angry, ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? Don't rush to justify it. Just sit with the question. Often just naming the emotion, anger, sadness, fear, is enough to create space between you and it. And in that space, clarity begins to form. You realize that your reaction is not always about the present moment. Sometimes it's about something deeper, a past wound, a limiting belief, an old narrative that still holds power. That's why understanding your emotional triggers is so important. Triggers are like emotional landmines, hidden just beneath the surface, waiting to be activated. Have you ever noticed how a seemingly harmless comment can make you feel deeply hurt or defensive? That reaction might have little to do with what was said, and everything to do with an old memory it stirred. Maybe a criticism echoes a harsh voice from your childhood. Maybe a rejection reminds you of a past betrayal. These connections aren't always obvious, but they shape your emotional world in powerful ways. By recognizing them, you take the first step toward healing. Recognizing your triggers takes courage. It means looking inward with honesty and without judgment. It means asking hard questions and being willing to sit with uncomfortable truths. But it's also incredibly liberating, because once you see where your reactions are coming from, you gain the power to change them. You're no longer a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. You're the one holding the reins. Of course, emotional control doesn't mean perfection. You will still have moments when you feel overwhelmed, when you react impulsively, when you lose your temper. That's okay. What matters is that you catch yourself, that you reflect afterward, that you learn, and over time, those moments become fewer. You start responding more often than you react. You start becoming someone others look to for stability, not because you're emotionless, but because you've learned how to channel your emotions with wisdom. One of the most effective ways to support this journey is through mindfulness. Mindfulness is not just meditation or silence. It's the practice of being fully present in the moment. It's what allows you to notice your emotions without becoming consumed by them. When you're mindful, you're no longer lost in thought or pulled by the past or future. You're here, right now. And in this presence, your emotions lose their grip. You stop reacting out of habit and start responding with intention. At the heart of mindfulness is the breath. Your breath is your anchor. It's always with you, always accessible. In moments of stress, your breath becomes shallow and fast. But if you slow it down, if you inhale deeply and exhale slowly, you send a message to your nervous system. You are safe. You are grounded. There's no need to react. This shift from reaction to regulation starts with something as simple as a breath. And in time, this practice rewires your brain. It builds new patterns, ones rooted in awareness, not impulse. Mindfulness isn't reserved for special moments or meditation cushions. It belongs in the everyday. When you wash dishes, feel the warmth of the water. When you walk, notice the ground beneath your feet. When you speak to someone, truly listen, without rehearsing your reply. These tiny acts of presence build resilience. They give you a quiet strength that will carry you through any storm. Mindfulness invites us to truly live in the present, to step out of the autopilot patterns that dominate much of our daily behavior, and instead to begin participating consciously in each moment of our lives. Most people move through their days half awake, reacting without thinking, speaking without listening, feeling without examining. Our hands perform tasks while our minds drift elsewhere, replaying old arguments, rehearsing future worries, entangled in invisible webs of thought that rarely serve us. But mindfulness is the act of returning, again and again, to the now. It is the subtle but profound decision to be here, to observe your own thoughts and emotions as they rise, without clinging to them or pushing them away. To bring awareness to each action, however small, whether it's brushing your teeth, stirring a pot, or simply placing your foot on the floor. When you do this, you begin to experience life not as a blur of events to endure, but as a rich, unfolding reality to fully engage with. In this heightened presence, something extraordinary happens. Your relationship with your emotions changes. Instead of being carried away by them like a leaf in the wind, you become the sky that contains the weather. The emotion might still rise, anger, sadness, anxiety, but you watch it with the stillness of someone who knows they are not the storm. The breath becomes your ally here, always available, always reliable. When you feel triggered or overwhelmed, Returning to the breath allows you to create a pocket of silence, a pause in the middle of the noise. That pause is powerful. It's where you begin to separate yourself from the automatic impulse to react. It's where you reclaim your voice, your reason, your deeper intentions. It's the space between stimulus and response where real transformation happens. Breathing consciously, even for a minute, can lower your heart rate, slow your thoughts, and reconnect you with your center. And from that center, you make better choices, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. But mindfulness is not a skill confined to meditation or quiet solitude. It is most powerful when practiced in the middle of life's messiness. When you're stuck in traffic, when someone cuts you off in conversation, when deadlines loom or someone's tone feels sharp. Those are the moments when mindfulness becomes real. Being present then is not easy, but it's meaningful. That presence doesn't mean you become passive or emotionless. It means you respond instead of react. You speak from clarity instead of defensiveness. You move with grace instead of haste. Mindfulness doesn't strip you of emotion. It teaches you how to hold emotion without becoming consumed by it. It teaches you how to act with intention rather than impulse. And perhaps most importantly, it opens the door to compassion, not only for others but for yourself. Self-compassion is often overlooked in discussions about emotional control, but it is vital. Too often we judge ourselves harshly for reacting poorly, for getting upset, for losing our temper. We replay our mistakes and wear shame like a second skin. But growth doesn't come from shame. It comes from honest reflection paired with gentle self-forgiveness. When you begin to observe yourself, your habits, your triggers, your emotional patterns, you must do so with kindness. You are not a problem to be fixed. You are a person learning, evolving, healing. And every moment you bring awareness to your inner world is a step toward liberation. With time, this self-awareness becomes second nature. You begin to notice patterns you never saw before. You recognize that your anxiety tends to rise in the morning, or that you become defensive when you feel unheard. And in recognizing these patterns, you gain choice. You can intervene. You can shift. Emotional triggers are often remnants of old wounds, experiences that left imprints on your nervous system, forming unconscious responses to new situations. These triggers are not always logical, they are visceral. A raised voice might remind you of childhood fear. A dismissive gesture may evoke the pain of past rejection. These reactions feel immediate and unmanageable, but they are not your destiny. They are your invitation to understand yourself more deeply. Each trigger, each flash of anger or sorrow or fear is a doorway. Behind it lies a memory, a belief, a moment that shaped how you respond to life. And if you can walk through that doorway, if you can pause, reflect, and ask yourself gently, what is this really about? You begin to untangle the thread. You begin to release the hold the past has over your present. But this work is not easy. It requires courage to look inward and patience to sit with discomfort. It requires that you become a witness to your own inner landscape, even when what you see is painful or confusing. You may find old shame still lurking. You may discover that certain behaviors you once blamed on others were actually rooted in your own insecurities or unmet needs. This is not about guilt. It's about responsibility. Responsibility for your emotions, your reactions, your healing. Because when you take responsibility, you take back your power. You no longer wait for others to change or for circumstances to be perfect. You become the source of change. You become the place where peace begins. One of the most transformative tools in this journey is something deceptively simple: the mental pause. Between every emotional impulse and the action that follows, there is a brief window, a sliver of time where you have a choice. Most people are not aware of this space. They move from feeling to action in an instant. Anger leads to yelling. Fear leads to withdrawal. Hurt leads to blame. But if you can learn to notice that moment, if you can train yourself to pause, even for 2 seconds, you can change everything. In that pause, you can breathe. In that pause, you can reflect. In that pause, you can decide. And that decision, made consciously, changes the entire trajectory of your interaction. Instead of escalating conflict, you de-escalate it. Instead of saying something you'll regret, you choose silence or softness. The pause is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is not avoidance. It is alignment. Practicing the pause is like training a muscle. At first it's difficult. You'll forget. You'll still react. You'll say things in anger, fall into old patterns. But if afterward you reflect, if you look back and say, "I could have paused there," you've already begun the work. And the next time, the pause may come a little earlier. You may catch yourself mid-sentence and shift your tone. You may feel the surge of emotion but decide not to act on it. Over time, this space becomes more accessible. You begin to live with more deliberation. You start to feel less like a victim of circumstance and more like the author of your own experience. Alongside the pause, another profound tool is the breath itself. Not just any breath, but conscious, intentional breathing. Techniques like the 4-7-8 method, inhaling for 4 seconds, holding for 7, and exhaling for 8, are not just calming rituals. They are nervous system resets. When practiced regularly, these techniques reduce stress, stabilize mood, and improve focus. They anchor you in your body when your mind wants to flee. They remind you that you're safe when everything inside you says you're not. And with consistent practice, the breath becomes a place of refuge, a place you can return to whenever the world feels too loud or your emotions feel too big. It's not magic, it's biology, but it feels like grace. Learning to breathe properly is like learning to speak a forgotten language, the language of your own body. Most people breathe shallowly, from the chest, especially when stressed, but deep, diaphragmatic breathing, letting your belly rise and fall, signals to your body that all is well. It tells your brain to calm down, to let go, to reset. And in that calm, your thoughts become clearer. Your reactions become slower. Your responses become wiser. You begin to see not only what is happening around you, but also what is happening within you. And this awareness changes everything. As you begin to master these inner tools, your outer world begins to shift as well. You start showing up differently in your relationships. You listen more deeply. You speak more gently. You no longer feel the need to defend yourself at every perceived slight or attack. You begin to understand that most people's behavior has little to do with you and everything to do with their own inner battles. And with that understanding comes compassion, not the kind that tolerates abuse or overlooks boundaries, but the kind that sees people as they are, imperfect, hurting, trying, just like you. Compassion becomes your superpower, not because it makes you better than others, but because it keeps you connected to your heart, to your values, and to humanity itself. Empathy deepens when you stop needing to be right. It expands when you stop needing to win, because now you see the game for what it is. You understand that behind every harsh word is a story. Behind every defensive stance is fear. Behind every argument is a cry to be heard, to be seen, to be loved. And you, now anchored in awareness, no longer meet fire with fire. You meet it with presence, with curiosity, with patience, and in doing so, you change the tone of the entire room, not through dominance or debate, but through emotional mastery. The more you live this way, the more you realize that control does not mean suppression. It means integration. You are no longer fighting your emotions, nor are you ruled by them. You are walking alongside them, listening to their messages, letting them guide but not govern. You are building a relationship with yourself that is based on trust and respect. And from that foundation, every other relationship benefits. You communicate more clearly. You forgive more easily. You express boundaries without guilt. You love without fear. It's important to remember that this journey is not about becoming unshakable all the time. It's about becoming aware when you are shaken. It's about returning to yourself more quickly each time you're pulled away. And that return, that quiet act of coming home to yourself again and again, is the true heart of emotional mastery. You will still make mistakes. You will still have moments where your emotions get the best of you, but you will no longer be lost in them. You will find your way back faster, more gently, more consciously. This is the work of a lifetime, and it is worth every breath. True emotional mastery culminates in a shift so subtle, yet so profound, that many never recognize it until it begins to change them from the inside out. It is the realization that the greatest power you can ever claim is the power to own your emotions fully, not to justify them, not to blame them on anyone else, but to take absolute responsibility for every inner experience you have. In a world that constantly points fingers, where we are encouraged to explain our behavior by what others have done to us, this level of ownership is rare. I got angry because they provoked me. I lashed out because they were being unreasonable. I'm anxious because life is so uncertain. These statements may sound reasonable. They may even be true in part, but they quietly give away your strength. They whisper that your peace depends on what others say, what others do, what circumstances unfold, and in that relinquishing, you lose your greatest treasure, the freedom to shape your own inner world, regardless of what happens outside of you. Taking responsibility for your emotions is not about blame, not toward others, and certainly not toward yourself. It's about stepping into maturity, where you acknowledge that while you cannot control the world, you can always influence how you respond to it. It is about understanding that your reactions are yours alone, not your parents', not your past's, not your environment's, yours. And in claiming them, you step out of victimhood and into authorship. You stop living reactively and start living deliberately. This shift does not happen with one decision, but through thousands of small conscious moments where you choose to pause instead of explode, reflect instead of project, respond instead of defend. It is in these moments that you begin to rewrite the narrative of your life, not by changing your history, but by changing how you carry it. When you begin to live with this level of responsibility, your entire relationship with the past evolves. No longer are your old wounds excuses, they are lessons. No longer do your triggers dictate your present. They become invitations to deeper healing. You may still feel pain, of course. You are human, but that pain is no longer a cage. It is a signal. And when you meet that signal with awareness, with breath, with gentle inquiry, something sacred happens. The past begins to loosen its grip. You realize that while you may have been shaped by what happened to you, you are not defined by it. You are something far greater than your history. You are the presence that sees, the strength that chooses, the awareness that transcends. And in this awareness, a new kind of empathy is born, one that does not pity, one that does not excuse, but one that sees with clarity and connects with love. You begin to notice that others, too, are living with their own unspoken wounds, their own forgotten pains, their own emotional habits, formed long before they knew they had a choice. You stop needing to judge them. You stop needing to fix them. You simply hold space. Sometimes that space is a quiet moment where you choose not to take something personally. Sometimes it's the strength to listen when someone is in pain without immediately reacting or retreating. Sometimes it's the wisdom to say nothing at all. In all these ways, your presence becomes healing, not because you offer solutions, but because you embody safety. In a world full of noise, you become the silence people didn't know they needed. In a world full of defense, you become a mirror of acceptance. But true empathy does not mean passivity, and compassion does not mean allowing harm. Those who master their emotions are often the clearest when it comes to setting boundaries, not because they need to protect themselves out of fear, but because they value themselves deeply. They know that saying no can be an act of love. They understand that protecting their peace is not selfish, it's responsible. So they do not remain silent when something feels wrong. They do not tolerate behavior that dishonors their worth. But they also don't attack, belittle, or retaliate. They speak with clarity, not cruelty. They hold space, but they do not abandon themselves. This balance between compassion and self-respect is delicate, but when found, it creates relationships that are rooted in truth, not fear. It fosters connections that are real, where both people are seen, both are heard, and both are honored. To live this way, to walk through the world with emotional awareness, with breath, with presence, is to live a life that is no longer reactive, but responsive. And this responsiveness touches every aspect of your existence. In your personal life, it means fewer conflicts and deeper intimacy. You stop needing to win arguments and start seeking understanding. You stop reacting from pain and start expressing from clarity. In your professional life, it means greater leadership. Emotional mastery allows you to remain calm under pressure, to think clearly when others panic, and to communicate with confidence instead of insecurity. People trust those who are emotionally grounded, not because they are perfect, but because they are stable, and that trust opens doors you could never force open. But beyond external success, emotional mastery gives you something even greater, an internal life that is rich, peaceful, and deeply fulfilling. You begin to enjoy your own company. You begin to feel at home within yourself. Your days are no longer dominated by chaos, even when chaos is present, because you now know how to return to your breath, return to your center, return to the still, quiet place within you that is untouched by external storms. This place is not built overnight. It is cultivated, breath by breath, choice by choice, moment by moment. But once it is built, it becomes your refuge. And from that refuge, you live not just with peace, but with power. Not the kind of power that seeks to control others, but the kind of power that allows you to remain rooted in your truth, no matter what others do. This is what it means to live mindfully, not just in meditation, not just when you are calm, but in every moment, in traffic, in disagreement, in uncertainty, in celebration. It means paying attention. It means slowing down enough to feel. It means listening not only with your ears, but with your heart. It means honoring your emotions without obeying them blindly. It means creating space within yourself and between yourself and others, where truth can emerge and peace can reside. It is the art of being fully awake in your own life, not missing the moments that matter, not rushing through the beauty of your existence. And when you live this way, even the mundane becomes meaningful. Even the small becomes sacred. But the journey does not end with personal awareness. It deepens when you realize that your presence affects others, that your reactions ripple outward, that your calm becomes a calm for those around you, that your healing inspires others to heal. You may never know how many lives you touch simply by choosing to live with awareness. You may never hear the words, but your energy will speak. In a conversation where you remain grounded instead of defensive, you might plant a seed of safety. In a moment where you pause instead of explode, you might shift the entire energy of a room. In a decision where you choose compassion over blame, you might change someone's day, or even their life. This is quiet leadership, the kind that doesn't demand attention, but earns deep respect. And so, you return again and again to the practices that anchor you. You breathe, not just to survive, but to live fully. You reflect, not to criticize yourself, but to grow. You observe your triggers, not to judge them, but to understand their roots. You forgive, not to forget what happened, but to free yourself from carrying its weight. You choose presence, not because it is easy, but because it is real. And through all of this, you become the kind of person who no longer needs to prove anything to anyone. Your peace speaks for itself. Your integrity radiates. Your stillness becomes a sanctuary, not only for yourself, but for others. In the end, emotional mastery is not about never feeling angry or sad or afraid. It's about knowing that those emotions are part of being human, and having the wisdom to meet them with curiosity rather than resistance. It's about realizing that your emotional reactions are not fixed. They are flexible. They can be changed. And it's about choosing, again and again, the response that aligns with your values, your vision, and your deepest truth. That choice may feel small in the moment. A breath, a pause, a soft word, but those small choices shape your life. They build the version of you that you are becoming, and that version is not dictated by fear or the past or others' expectations. It is created by your commitment to live with intention. So ask yourself, who do I want to be when things get hard? What kind of energy do I want to bring into the room? What legacy do I want to leave? Not just in words or accomplishments, but in the hearts of the people I touch. The answers to these questions won't come from theory or intellect alone. They will come from how you show up, how you breathe through discomfort, how you hold space for yourself and others, how you choose peace, not because you are weak, but because you are rooted. That is what it means to master your emotions. That is what it means to live with freedom. And perhaps most importantly, remember that this is not a race. There is no final destination. Emotional mastery is a lifelong journey. Some days you'll feel strong. Other days you'll slip. But every time you return to awareness, Every time you choose intention over impulse, you are evolving, you are rising, you are becoming, and that becoming is the most beautiful part of all, because it means you are awake, you are alive, you are here,